AI can benefit humanity, but only if humans are in the loop.
And on that other side of the equation, as we were mentioning a bit earlier, is the patients themselves are using AI to interact with healthcare information as well in a different way.
And I think it is interesting because I blame the AI industry, honestly, for some of the challenges that we're having because they do, to your point, market AI like it's magic in the age of AI. Let's simplify the purpose and make it easy for people to interact and get the things done that they want to get done.
Hi, I'm here today for today's episode. What I wanted to do is to delve into AI and the impact of AI on healthcare marketers and on patients and how they're interacting with websites in general. And the person that's the best in all these different fields of subject is messier. So I invited him over to the podcast to ask him a bit of questions about what he's seeing with AI. What are ways that we can maybe make it more practical? Because there's a lot of hype and then there's like the grandioseness of AI. So I'm Brad, I'm your host. I'm owner of Symetris. We're a digital agency focused on helping our clients extend the lifespan of their websites, building new websites, evolving on those websites. And Matt, maybe you can introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate the invitation today. Excited to be here. As you mentioned, my name is Matt Sear, and I am the founder and president of Loop AI Consulting, focused really primarily on the healthcare and marketing agency spaces. The goal really is to help bring, as you said, sort of practical support to different types of marketing focused organizations as they adopt AI in both small and larger ways. The name of my company really is focused on the idea that, I always say that, AI can benefit humanity, but only if humans are in the loop. It's, my connection to humanity, here's a habit that's for an awkward transition. My connection to humanity goes all the way back to the start of my career, actually, which was in healthcare in Boston. Way back in the day, I started out first working at Brigham and Women's Hospital, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute for a year, and then transitioned over to Boston Children's Hospital, where I worked for a dozen years and really had a strong focus on content development of just about every kind, helped lead us into the social media age and played a significant role in the website for Boston Children's, and then transitioned over into higher ed, where I led some digital marketing teams at universities, and then made the jump over into agency life, where my focus was to work exclusively with healthcare and higher ed clients, primarily on large-scale website builds. And so very familiar with all the complexities and challenges of healthcare websites and health system websites and all of the many things that it needs to do for marketers and all of the many headaches that it causes for marketers. So excited to be here today to talk about the intersection of websites and healthcare and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And then thanks for being here. And I think that element you were just talking about, that complexity of health system websites, there's so many pages, there's so many stakeholders, there's so many things to take into account. And now there's these, on top of that, there's the huge expectation of you got to do more with less and you have to leverage AI on every corner. And I think that there is this scale or this hype around AI and how it's suddenly going to make all of our problems go away, or suddenly it's going to need a quarter of the staff to deliver the same or more. And I think I want to be able to break through that hype because there is great improvements to efficiency that AI can help us do if we're methodical and very thoughtful about how we're approaching it. And on that other side of the equation, as we were mentioning a bit earlier, is the patients themselves are using AI to interact with healthcare information as well in a different way. So those are two, I think, sides of that coin that we have to address. So when we're talking about making AI pragmatic, right, and less of this overarching thing that's going to solve every problem, how do you usually approach when someone's trying to reach out to you and say, "Hey, I want to implement more AI, or we got to leverage AI more," right? But where do you start? What do you try to figure out about those
Yeah.
individuals or the
Yeah,
organization?
great question. And I think it is interesting because I blame the AI industry, honestly, for some of the challenges that we're having because they do, to your point, market AI like it's magic,
It
right? That
is.
it's going to solve every problem. It's not going to take any work to do it. And it's just going to be you push a button and your thing is done. And one of the things that I'm learning in all of my work with clients is that AI implementation transformation, whatever we want to call it, is not a straight line, right? It's not like, hey, we're going to start here and we're going to solve this thing over time in a very direct line way, and then we're going to have adopted AI and we'll be all done. It's not anything really like that. There's learning along the way, there's failure along the way, there's success along the way. And I think, this idea that it's just a sort of magic bullet and it's just going to be done really does a disservice to the marketers out there who are trying to figure out how to do this. And so what I always tell folks when they come and talk with me for the first time is that we really like to understand the context of their business and their brand first. It really is not about AI. I always say, AI is actually a human challenge, not a technology challenge.
That's interesting. I like that point of view. Yeah. So AI is
Yeah,
a human challenge, not a tech challenge. Okay.
it really is, right? I mean, I think about, all the news that's out there is about how AI is taking jobs and AI is making mistakes and, all of the many things that we hear every day. But what I see when I talk to healthcare marketing teams is just a very high level of anxiety around AI for the reasons that you just outlined, right? They're worried about, well, am I going to be part of a staff reduction because of this? Am I going to lose all of the creative aspects of my job because of this? So there's just a real high level of anxiety. And so what I have found is that if you come in and start from the problem solution place, which is where are the challenges that you're having in your operation and how can we help you address that? AI may or may not be the right answer to address those challenges. But we like to really delve in to say, okay, let's look closely at some things that you're doing that maybe could be benefited by AI, right? Some processes that are repetitive and maybe not all that fun or interesting that AI can be quite good at and never gets bored of. And then your team now has the opportunity and the time to do the stuff that it loves. And that really the reason they got into healthcare marketing in the first place. So to really succinctly answer your question, I like to start with a very tight understanding of where they are, identify specific opportunities to potentially do some AI implementation, and then do small pilot projects to prove out the value of that small change. Because I find it does two things. One, it shows that AI can actually bring benefit. But two, and I think frankly, more importantly, back to the human side of things, is that it helps bring people forward in the conversation and feel like they're a part of the decision making and not feel like they're being run over by a technology that is completely out of their control.
Yeah, I think that agency is super important in the flow. And from what I'm understanding in your conversation and in what you're saying, and I 100% agree with this, is that AI is simply another tool, right, in the toolbox to help achieve or improve or leverage things. And if your current processes and workflows on, I guess, let's say, for example, creating content for your website or stuff like that, if those are already broken, AI is just going to amplify the brokenness, I think, of that.
Yeah.
It's not like a kind of a Band-Aid that's gonna fix the problem. It's just gonna make that problem potentially worse, and I think it's more about how do we find the right spot where it fits. As you mentioned, it might not even be the right tool to use there. I often consider it as I kinda see AI as a really efficient intern, but that you can't really trust the output that that intern's gonna do, but he can do really boring jobs or super fast. And I think that if we have that kind of mindset around what AI can help on especially on the efficiency, right? Operational efficiency part and marketing efficiency and operations, I think that's a good way to view that. What do you, like you were mentioning how, let's identify a pilot project and how do we implement that? How do you scope that out so that it's not, because it's so easy to say, oh, but it's also going to do all these things, right? How do
Mhm.
you confine the scope of that pilot project?
Yeah.
And how does that develop I guess it's kind of like, maybe I'm tan a tangent here, but it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm going to suddenly get into shape and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do all the machines at once, right? But
Mhm.
I think building the habit of let's just go to the gym and do something that's we know that's just enough, right? That gets us in the habit of using the gym, then we can increase on that once we've built that maturity.
Yeah.
How do you identify that pilot project that's the right bite size, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Really good analogy. I think the way that I like to do it is it's honestly a very tangible, hands on process. It involves oftentimes, if I can do it, being in a room with team members and literally whiteboarding out processes from beginning to end. Oftentimes, we'll pick a workflow or a process We'll start at the beginning and we'll document all of the steps that are involved, all of the people that touch that process, all of the technologies that are involved across that whole process, where there are known challenges. And what that allows us to do is, one, understand what's happening there and where there might automatically be some efficiencies or some duplication of effort. But it also begins, and we also begin to be able to see where AI can come in and start to have an impact. And so I could show you Miro boards that I've done with teams where we literally are laying out a process. And along that path, I'll put like a little robot emoji at different parts of the process flow to say, this is a spot where AI might be able to help you. And so we go through that process, we identify the biggest challenges that that team is facing, and then we go through a prioritization exercise. I have the team take a value versus effort matrix and start to put those challenges and those opportunities on that matrix, which allows us to really identify those high pain point, but low effort, high potential activities. And so to your question, that then allows us to really zero in on something narrow, particularly and specifically narrow, so that we can test it in a limited way. And again, show some benefit or not. Either way, we're going to learn something. It may not be a success, but then that allows us to come back and say, okay, here's what we did. It was a specific thing in a specific area. It showed a benefit. For example, we've got a client that's a media planning and buying client and an agency, and they were struggling with their client reporting process. And so we went through this process with them. We identified some areas within the client reporting process to optimize, built a couple custom agents for them, and then did a time test and found that we were able to save them about 40% time on that reporting process that then was able to be given back to the senior strategist so that she could be focused on, highlighting key opportunities, building relationships with the client, all of that really important stuff. So again, it's that really narrow focus that allows us to show potential and to build out from there.
I think and you're mentioning how that saved her time, right? And in these internal efficiencies, I feel that a lot of that value or the ROI we're getting from AI is a lot about saving time on these administrative and repetitive tasks. That's a lot of
Yeah.
where that is. And also, there's an element that I've seen, which is also getting insights or analyzing information where, and that's maybe connected what you were talking about, the strategy or the strategist is what I've often found is that, as healthcare marketers they have all kinds of data in all kinds of different silos and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to analyze it. So they're kind of like, it's not like they don't have enough data to report. It's like they have too much and they don't know what insight to extract from that. And one thing that I've found interesting and valuable is to start that with, hey, this is my data. This is what I'm trying to figure out. AI, can you give me a first idea or first draft of what are the insights you'd see from here? And that usually can start a larger conversation, get you to have a more strategic viewpoint, right? And it's doing that legwork of analyzing that data and churning it that one might not necessarily have done.
Yeah, that the client that I just mentioned a moment ago, that was one of the goals, was to be able to not just free the strategist up to be more strategic and to be more relationship focused, but also frankly to put the ball on the tee for her with some strategic insights being aggregated and generated for her. Right. So going through literally hundreds of past client examples using this agent and identifying specific places where insight can come from, and the kinds of things that this agency was regularly finding in their client spaces that they could help them benefit from. And so the agent was coming to the strategist with already a starting point of insight that she could then say, yeah, this tracks for me. This feels right. Or no, let's go down a little bit of a different path. So exactly to your point. And you also brought up another really interesting thing that I wanted to reflect on something you said a moment ago, which is around, AI can amplify in positive ways, but also can expose problems and where they're broken in process. And so to me, it's exactly the same with data. AI is incredibly good at consuming data, doing good things with data, but of course that only matters if the data that's being evaluated is good. And so another huge part of this whole AI transition for folks is getting a better handle on the data that they have. To your point, it's everywhere, but is it really benefiting you? So how do you get more value from it? How do you normalize it in a way that's going to bring you more potential down the road?
Yeah, 100%. And the quality of data is so essential to getting the right insights. And it's, as you mentioned, it's exacerbated with AI. I wanted to maybe touch back on one thing that you mentioned a bit earlier, which was how when we're you got let's say I'm putting this situation here. I have a CMO who says, hey, team, and you guys need to leverage AI more, right? That's kind of like a very diffuse, message that he sends to the marketing team. And then the marketing team, reaches out to an expert like you, or, works with us to kind of leverage AI a bit more. And then we get into the weeds of this and then we're like, oh, like, can we map out your processes, right? And figure out where we can optimize. It sounds so, it sounds like it's so unsexy, right? Compared
Yeah.
to the idea of what AI could be. And
Yeah.
yet that's where the real value can be extracted. And so how do you, slightly talked about it with the ROI, but how do you then sell that back up and say, hey, you know what? After having done this, this is where we've seen there's optimizations and improvements that are possible and that we can go to the next step, right?
Yeah, you're right. And it is so unsexy to be coming in and talking about workflows and Miro boards, and you're completely right. But I think there's a part of that reality setting in that I think we're all going through right now, right? I just actually wrote a blog post today about we're moving into the awkward adolescence of AI
Okay, right, cool.
after its idealistic youth. And a
Right.
part of that is this this realization that this stuff isn't just going to be easy, and it's not just going to be sexy, and it's not just going to be fun,
Hmm.
and that it is going to take process, and it is going to take some time. And again, it's not that magic wand that we're waving. And so the conversation, interestingly, I do find that a lot of CMOs are cognizant of the fact that it's not just going to be a light switch that they're going to flip. They understand that there's more there. Do they understand how much more is there? Not always, but they get that this is inherently, again, a people challenge, not a technology challenge most of the time. And so that conversation is, we need to get to know who you are as a business and where your challenges are so that we can really help you help you implement AI in ways that are going to really make your jobs easier and more effective, and make the folks that work for you hopefully happier and more engaged in the work that they're doing. ROI conversations always help, right? Being able to go and say, look, we've done this for other folks, and this is the value that we've been able to show for them. And I think, one of the other key points that I try to bring to the table is around the technologies themselves, right? A lot of folks come to me and say, we're wondering if we need to go buy a new technology for X, Y, and Z. And I say, before we ever get to that point, let's call a timeout. I don't want to have a conversation about new technology until we understand your current technology. And what is your current stack, right? What are the tools that you're currently paying for? Because you know this as well as I do, the vast majority of organizations are not benefiting fully from the technology that they're already paying for, right?
Yes, 100%. And there's so many of these tools that are just wrappers on technology that exists already too. And I think because it sounds like a milestone to say, hey, I got this new technology. Hey, I implemented this new thing. And it's that kind of bright, shiny objects, situation. On my end, a couple of, quick wins that I've seen or mini pilot projects have been to, because as you were saying, data is super important, and this kind of connects with the patient, right? Because they're now searching more through AI on what they're trying to achieve, or they're going to find care, and we can delve into that in a moment. But what that means is that they need to be able to see your website correctly, see the information on it, and oftentimes the metadata on the pages and all this kind of stuff that's hidden to humans but is visible to machines and AI is not really well optimized or not up to date. And one quick win there is, like you can just get the entire sitemap, have AI parse through it, identify, hey, these pages are missing metadata, or these are like, not relevant to our current brand or something. And even have AI propose, like, this is the new metadata you should be putting in these pages.
Mhm.
And that would have been like such a boring project that nobody would have wanted to do. And it would have, been pushed away for several quarters. And that could be done in almost like within a month, right? The whole project from beginning to end. And I think those are the types of quick wins that we need to kind of celebrate a bit more, because they are the foundations of the visibility of the website in the future. Another example I'd have is, uh, journey mapping is often very assumption based.
Mhm.
And I understand that every hospital and every health system is their own unique snowflake, right? But the patient journey is pretty similar, right, from wherever you are in the world. If you're trying, to do, I don't know, some cancer screening, right? And
Mhm.
so you can have the first draft of that journey be created by AI and kind of get that step ahead, and it just accelerates the process. That's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I love the way you phrase that, these journeys have typically been assumption based. I always have thought about most journeys and personas as largely being storytelling exercises, right? Jane lives in, Montreal and she has 5 cats and she likes to watch HBO. And it's sort of like storytelling for storytelling's sake. It doesn't really get at the drivers of behavior and decision making. And I think you're right. And the more that we can use AI to use real data to inform and understand who our consumers are, I think the better off we're going to be.
So now talking about the consumer, the patient, right? So you mentioned recently that you saw a couple of stats about
Yeah.
how people are changing the way they're interacting with digital, especially using more AI. The adoption's been pretty quick. And so tell me a bit about what you've noted, and I think it was Press Ganey that had these stats, and what does that imply for healthcare marketers and hospitals and websites in general?
Yeah, it was a study that Press Ganey did over the summer. I think it may have come out in July. And it was a really wonderful study of the AI related search behaviors of healthcare consumers. And some of the data that they shared showed that 43% of consumers are already using AI to research medical conditions, 42% to explore treatment options. This number actually, frankly, kind of blew my mind. 31% already using it to schedule appointments. Now,
Schedule?
to
Really?
schedule.
Wow.
Now
That's
we can
scratching the
delve into what that actually means when it comes. There's so many complexities of scheduling these days, but the fact to me that you've got consumers who are already using these technologies in such a deep way reminds me immediately of my days back at Boston Children's when we were adopting social media and people were using Facebook in the same way, 20 years ago, and everybody at my department was freaking out like, oh my gosh, people are using Facebook. They're writing complaints about us on Facebook. We can do nothing about it. They're using it to find doctors, right? So this to me is an echo of that same experience. And I think we can take a lot of lessons from it. And one of which is really understand where your customer's coming from. What are they experiencing every day? How are they looking for information? What kind of experiences are they looking to have? The Press Ganey study, again, you and I talked about this a moment ago, but we're seeing 2 to 3 times longer searches now than we had
in the
seen
number of words in the
the
query, right?
number of words, right? And a lot of this is now you can pick up ChatGPT and have a
Right.
conversation with it, right? So you're having these much longer voice-driven conversations. Another compelling finding to me is 60% increase in voice searches in languages other than English, which to me is an incredible opportunity to meet your customer base where they are, right? If you're up in Canada, you've got a lot of French speakers, what a great opportunity to make sure that you're communicating in the native language where people feel the most comfortable, not just from a comfort perspective, but also from an understanding of medical concepts perspective and that language. So if you can speak in the language of your customer, gosh, what an incredible opportunity to be even more helpful to them. And the net result of all of this, and I don't think this will be news to anybody that's listening, is Press Ganey, finding about a 30 to 75% dip in organic traffic to many different
Yeah.
healthcare websites. I think we're all seeing and feeling that. And to me, a lot of people are like, the sky is falling, we're losing traffic to our website. What should we do? To me, the question is not about how do we make our website better necessarily? It's how do we better meet the needs of our consumer wherever and however that happens. And if the website has a job that's changing, which I think it is, let's focus on that job. Let's really let it meet the needs of the consumer in very specific and direct ways. You started off this conversation by talking about how these hospital websites are just so large and complex and bloated. There's no need for all that in the age of AI. Let's simplify the purpose and make it easy for people to interact and get the things done that they want to get done. And so to me, while AI certainly is causing some angina for people, I also hope it's, signaling to them that there's real opportunity here.
Yeah, 100%. And what that I feel means for the website is all that, since a lot of that health information is, there's a lot of these generic encyclopedic type content pages on websites. And so those are not really relevant anymore. Like, I understand that some teams want to just keep them because they've built up some rankings on those pages over the years. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but we should not be investing anymore in those specific pages. Other thing that I think people are starting to expect is when there's the on-site search, because sometimes you're not going to find it immediately on the website, and then there's going to be the on-site search, and people are expecting that the behavior of that on-site search to be similar to the one you'd get with an AI, right? So that you can type out, like, approximate what you really want to do, and that the search is going to give you the right pages and understand what you meant, as opposed to having to specifically write the exact word itself or like a plural version. So I think there's a lot of expectations being built up about the websites themselves. I'm not like, there have been tests about with chatbots on websites
Hmm.
on kind of interacting. And I feel that it's still a bit hit or miss because we're not sure exactly how to approach it. Some have done it really well, but then we have to make sure that it's not providing health information in the wrong way, and how do we limit it? So I think those conversations are also very interesting around, again, because at that point we're using, getting back to that, AI as an intern. If the patient is interacting with this intern, giving them information, we have to be very, very clear on what the intern can provide and not have it, hallucinate or propose responses that are not at all in line with diagnosis or, recommended medical procedures, right? So it needs to be, oh, well, you should now book an appointment with a physician to find out more about this. I can't go further. So I think that limits the governance around the AI is super important when it's client facing,
Hmm.
probably more so.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it goes back to, where this conversation started, which is also around the human in the loop, right? You wouldn't have an intern publish a news article without your having done a review and an edit of it.
Right.
And I think people, one of the things that I see people doing is saying, gosh, these AI systems can be so smart. I'm just going to assume that it's done a good job and I'm going to run with it. And I think the fact checking component where we are right now in this stage of AI is so critical, right? I think we've gotten to the point where, okay, we're comfortable letting it do certain things for us, but you still have to go in and say, is this factually correct? Are we saying things in the right way? Have we misrepresented the facts here? Again, I wrote a post about this earlier this year, but I recently did an article where I had asked my chat GPT to summarize a podcast that Sam Altman from OpenAI had been on with his brother. And I had not to, in full disclosure, I had not read the entire article, but I dropped it into chat GPT and I said, give me a summary of this article that I can use. And so it spit out this summary, and it started talking about a conversation between tech bros and what they call dirt bros, which in this case were farmers. And so they were saying, like, the dirt bros were talking about how, farming was going to always be there to sustain the world. And then the tech bros have soft hands and they've never done a hard day's work in their life. All of it was made up.
What?
Every last
That's
piece of
crazy.
it was made up. It was unbelievable to me. Because I went back and I thought, man, I don't remember there being farmers in this conversation. And so I went back and I read it, and it was literally Sam Altman and his brother talking about the jobs of the future. And somehow the AI hallucinated this entire scenario between tech bros and dirt bros. And I thought, man, we have to be so careful in how we're not only using these technologies, but how much agency we're giving them in our lives. So very, very important for sure to keep an eye on them.
That is such a that is, I think, the weird duality of AI, how it's so smart in certain aspects, right? But so dumb in other ones. And it's kind of hit or miss. You don't necessarily know when it's going to happen. But
Yeah,
I guess it's improving over time.
it
So
is.
what I want to maybe just kind of close our conversation on is, and we started off on saying, what are the best ways to pragmatically implement AI as a healthcare marketer?
Mhm.
And we talked about the pilots and stuff like that. So what do you feel are things that are really valuable to build that AI quick, small wins that are building momentum in the organization? Like, what would you recommend to a healthcare marketer who says, "Oh, I want to leverage AI better."
Mhm.
So, what would be your kind of what would be their path? What would be their next steps from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah. So to me, there's a two-pronged starting point. One is find your champions, right? Find the people who are enthusiastic about AI and understand maybe not everything about it and maybe haven't done a ton of using of it, but are just intrigued by it. Find those people and involve them in a pilot project, help them guide that process and really build off of their enthusiasm for this. As we started off by saying, there's a lot of anxiety involved in AI taking things over. So the more that you can bring the humans in and involve them in decision making in that way, I think is you're going to be more effective. And I would say related to that, the other prong is at the same time, be bringing all of your people along with you, right? I think it's easy to say, well, this group of people is really into it and they get it. But this group of people over here is kind of dragging their feet and they don't want us to adopt AI. So let's not worry about them. And it may be the case that there are folks who just are not going to engage, and that's okay. But I think it's the job of the leader in the marketing realm to bring everybody with them and to help people up level and understand. And so part of this is, yes, pilots, but the other part of it is education and training so that people can start to demystify AI a little bit and to say, like, it's not just this crazy mystical thing you said it earlier. It's a tool, right? It's a
It
set of
becomes less scary, right? Because you start
less scary.
playing with it and you're like, oh, it's not so bad after all. It does have advantages, and it probably won't completely replace my job. It's going to just help me do my job better.
Exactly. And sometimes you get a good laugh out of it when it makes up tech bros versus dirt bros,
Right.
so it's like you get to have some of the fun alongside of it and watch it go through its awkward adolescence.
Cool. Yeah. And to summarize a bit of that, like the AI, we have to slowly build momentum, get those champions internally, do these smaller prototypes. It's not going to replace a marketer's job. It's going to help them do their job better and do the real work that they really are valuable in, right? As opposed to the busy work that's maybe less valuable that they accomplish. And we were talking a bit earlier about the workflows and identifying in the workflows. And I feel that if there was a next step, or for someone who's listening, what they could do is they could like immediately say, just this week, figure out like in their current flows, like where's their stuff that's admin, kind of more tedious tasks that they're doing, that, hey, could I just automate that? Because this is something that I could work on easily,
Mhm.
and I think that could be a really easy first step to just kind of work with AI and test it out if you're really at the bare bones of not having, really delved into it because maybe your organization has been restricting AI for privacy reasons or whatever. And because there are those internal
Definitely.
guardrails that often IT is putting right now to make sure that there's no craziness going on with AI. So I think that's a good starting point for the healthcare marketer, and also to keep an eye on how the patient behavior is evolving,
Yeah.
especially with their expectations about more specific um, action maybe driven content. We didn't get into that too much, but since they're doing all that research preemptively with AI, when they get to your website, they're not there to do research. So how are you going to adapt your website to that? How are you going to adapt the search on your website for that? Is there other opportunities? But considering how behavior for patients is changing, so those would be probably the two main takeaways. Is there anything else you'd add on to that?
Yeah, I would add one more, and this one's maybe a little more philosophical, which is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think right now what I'm seeing in healthcare marketing is that marketers are looking for the perfect moment to do things, right? And I think what we're finding with AI is that there is not a perfect moment. You're not going to be able to do AI all at once, right? And I think there's a natural conservatism in healthcare with good reason, right? You're dealing with healthcare information and emotional things. And so I think marketers sometimes will use that as an excuse to say, I need to wait till we have the perfect excuse or the perfect technology or the perfect alignment internally to do something. And I always say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Get started today, do something small, whether it's using a technology or writing a draft of governance regulations that you want to implement, something small that just can be a momentum beginner for you, and then keep going. Because part of what I've seen in the last year in particular is marketers are getting started and then they either run into a roadblock and stop or get distracted. And I don't mean distracted in a negative way. We all have very busy lives, but get distracted by other things and then lose that momentum. And I'm finding that if you can just get started and keep going, even in small ways, I think you're going to show a lot of benefit.
I just want to maybe just kind of double click on that just as we're finishing. 'Cause it's something we haven't talked too much about in our conversation, but it's the fact that a healthcare organization by default is risk averse, right? And AI, in a sense, brings a level of risk into the conversation,
Absolutely.
right? And so, how are from the marketing director to the CMO, how do they manage that risk, right, with AI? Do you have any specific tips around that you've experienced?
I've seen two paths so far. I've seen one path, which is the organization is handling writ large, is handling AI governance, decision making. There's a committee, they're doing all of it. We don't want to get ahead of that process.
Hmm.
The other end of that spectrum is we're going to do some things here in our department in a small way to start adopting AI, putting governance in place and seeing where that goes. And so to me, I think we probably need to shoot the gap and go right in the middle, which is marketers should be taking the reins in specific areas where data privacy is up for grabs, right? We talk about all the ways that potentially marketers are engaging with patient information. That's the first place you need to be spending your time engaging with IT, making sure that you're not doing anything that's going to put your organization at risk. But getting started, as I said before, don't let the perfect be the enemy. They could do something, engage your community, engage your legal counsel, your compliance team, help understand where the organization can go in ways that are meaningful and beneficial, and also helpful to your patients, right? And they want to know how you're using AI. And on the other end of that spectrum, the folks who are just waiting for the organization to figure it out, I would just encourage them to say, that's important. You want to know what the organization is doing, but also find ways that you can start to bring a marketing specific point of view to the table and start having conversations that might spur some activity that could benefit the organization overall.
Cool. Yeah. And marketing is also people often go into marketing because of the innovation aspect of it, right? And so I think they're often leaders in the organization about the adoption of AI and the fact that there's a lot of their work that is probably in the clearest ways that AI can be improved on content writing and interaction with all this data, which is maybe less obvious in other fields in
Yep.
healthcare, right? So I think
Yep.
they can be leaders, right? But they have to approach that as you mentioned correctly with and mentioning addressing that risk, addressing the governance. So fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the last point I would make on that, I think is a really important one because I had somebody say to me not long ago, and this was really a helpful framing. If a healthcare marketer doesn't implement AI, the healthcare system is not going to go out of business, right? Meanwhile, on an agency side, you own an agency and I own an agency. If we don't adopt AI, it's likely that we're going to go out of business. So I think the stakes are different for healthcare marketers. They're not maybe as high wire act as they are for some others, which to me actually gives them a little bit of freedom to be able to say, let's go and experiment and test and try a little bit here and maybe lead, to your point, on the innovation side. Let's maybe lead a little bit in this area where maybe the rest of the organization is not yet quite comfortable moving forward. So I would just say, give it a shot and learn along the way and frankly, have some fun along the way while you're doing it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. I love the way that it's maybe not as existential to a healthcare organization. I think that maybe potentially just that message can reduce at a certain level the anxiety, right? We were mentioning at the beginning of the conversation that it's the organization, people are still going to need care, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's great. All right. Thank you so much for the conversations. This is really insightful. Loved bouncing ideas with you, and hopefully we'll do it another time.
I'm sure we will. It's great to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Cheers.
Cheers.